So every day, each of us engages in conversations with ourselves and with other people. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Throughout those conversations, we share our thoughts, we share our experiences, and we affirm to others and to ourselves what we believe and what we want for our lives. And sometimes we affirm what we want for our lives by affirming what we don't want for our lives. I don't want to do this anymore, but what do we want to do? But it's important to understand the thoughts we have to ponder today. There are two things that we need to really get a handle on because it's still the beginning of a new year. One is, what do we envision for our lives? And the second one is equally important. How will the thoughts we hold help support what we envision for our lives? Now, you may think those two things don't go together, but they absolutely do. You cannot say, I want a healthier relationship this year, and then talk trash the whole time or think badly of all the people you don't like. Because all it does is bring the wrong balance to light. And one of the greatest strengths we have as humans is the ability to be the observer in our lives. We can literally be doing and see ourselves doing all at the same time. It's pretty magical when you think about it. One of Unity's 5 principles says, I create my experiences by what I choose to think and believe. Choose to think, feel, and believe. We only have 5 principles. And this is one of the most important ones. The quality of my life, the quality of my emotions, the quality of my consciousness comes from the quality of my thinking. If I am unhappy, I have to think about how often I'm thinking about my happiness versus talking about my unhappiness. The quality of our thoughts can and will create the best in our life and the worst. So we have to decide which side we're advocating for, the best or the worst. And it's simple. Positive thoughts lead to positive outcomes. Negative thoughts lead to more negative outcomes. It doesn't take much to figure that out. So if we know that, why do we still have negative thoughts? That's the question. Why are we still holding negative thoughts at any time about ourselves or about others? The more limiting our thoughts are, the more potential exists for obstacles and unhappiness. So we have to understand that these two are going together. If I'm struggling and I have limiting thoughts, I'm never going to this, I'm never going to that, then my life will continue its own negative patterns. If I'm sad all the time, where are my thoughts? Are they in digging up what brings me sadness, or are they in digging up what brings me happiness? If I don't like what I see, I have to change it. If I don't like what I feel, I have to change it. If I don't like where I am, I have to change it. Our mind is so powerful and it's such a creative force that it will shape our reality. So that means we have to make conscious choices about how we see the things that are happening to us. And that's where today's topic comes in: spiritual editing. While we know that negative thoughts are going to arise, we can learn to acknowledge when our thoughts do not support our vision or our desires or good feelings within us. And in those moments, we have to replace our thoughts with affirming and useful perspectives. I went over to talk to Margaret this morning. That's exactly what she did for me. She shifted my consciousness about something I was concerned about. That's why I went to her. I needed to give it up, and I needed her to affirm I was on the right track. That's what we need to do. We don't need to wallow in our moments of insanity or unhappiness or anger or disappointment. None of that is ever going to make your day. None of it. It's a choice. Every minute of every day, it is a choice to decide what today will look like, what my life will look like, how I'm going to manage myself and my thinking. So when something comes up, oh, the traffic's so bad, I'm never going to get there on time. It goes, and we're going to replace it with whatever time I get there, I want to be safe. We're not going to put ourselves in these places that I always say to Jeffrey, makes our head go into our shoulders to the point where we have no neck. I'm always smacking him and telling him, your neck is gone. I go in his office and he's like this. I go, where's your neck? Because I'm trying to remind him, and I get him to remind me when I'm walking like this at the end of the day. He goes, why are you walking like that? I go, I didn't realize I was. It's that physical experience of changing what we're experiencing. Think about all the experiences each of us in this room has had, and the people we've encountered, and the challenges we've faced. I could spend a week with all of you and never dump all of it. All the negatives I could come up with if I really wanted to. But if we don't pay attention to the fact that those experiences become our stories, and we become the main character in those stories. So we are either victim, victor, or sometimes the villain. But we don't recall it that way. Most of the time, we're the victim. And when we are the victor, it was at someone else's expense. And we might even boast about it. Well, I put him in his place. Well, I told her exactly how I see it. None of that is good for us. Not for our health, not for our happiness. And as we recall and describe our experiences, we usually share how we emerge stronger or more knowledgeable along the way, or how our lives have been completely derailed by what has happened to us. We can identify right in the moment whether we are empowered or disempowered by how we're speaking and how we describe things. Empowering comments might sound like this. I feel good about how I handled that situation. I'm proud that I was able to step outside my comfort zone on this. It was a difficult time, but honestly, I learned so much. Those are empowering comments. The disempowering comments sound like, I don't handle confrontation well. I've never stood up for myself, and this is not a surprise to me. It was just another disappointment for me. If our words don't help us, why do we use them? If they make us feel bad about ourselves, why do we say them? And while the disempowering statements may actually be accurate descriptions of how we feel at the time, the truth is they are going to become a storyline And that narrative is going to help us hold negative memories in our psyche about those people, that situation, or ourselves. And we will find ourselves stuck in our circumstances. Example, perfect example. Friday, Jeffrey and I were at the hospital for 8 hours for our daughter's surgery. And, I got there. I knew the surgery was supposed to be a certain time. We were with her. It was delayed a couple hours, but then she didn't come out of recovery when they said she was. And the little app they gave me wasn't notifying me. And for 1.5 minutes or more, maybe 3 at best, I felt this really weird feeling come over me, like paralyzing fear for just those minutes. And all I heard in my head was, what if? What if? What if? And then I thought, literally observing myself, being in that moment, thought, what are you doing to yourself right now? How is this helping you? And I let it go. And I immediately started talking to Jeffrey, and then I changed the subject with the person sitting next to me and just tried to change my outlook and hold nothing but positive thoughts. Another hour went by, and they said that on the screen that she was in recovery. I'm like, I got that. I don't know what the status is. And finally, Jeffrey gets a message, and it says, we'll be notified shortly. Well, shortly seemed like a lifetime. It always does. But in that moment, I started thinking, well, I need more water. I need to take a walk, and I need to let this go. It's all in God's hands. I'm not going to change one thing that's happening right now. Be done with that. Be done. And I was done. And when I saw her, I was my usual humorous, annoying self. I said, well, you look pretty good, but you don't seem to be moving that well. But I just was in that space where I could be done. But the point I'm trying to make is that the humanness never goes away. The moments like that never go away. It's what we do with them that we have to be mindful of. How was I helping her by being afraid? How was I helping me? The conscious way we choose to identify with each of our experiences, both in real time and in our reflections, will eventually become the programmed narrative that we believe and accept as our reality. So I want you to just consider this. If any belief you currently have is not representative of what you want to experience or what you want to remember or how you want to show up in life, then it's time to do some serious spiritual editing. It's critical for us to understand that if we're the victor, victim, or villain, then why wouldn't we choose our character to our advantage? So let's try this for a minute. I want you to think of something you've told yourself for weeks, months, or even years about how you are limited by your circumstances. Anything. Some story you've been carrying around for a really long time and how much you've given energy to it. And I want you to ask yourself, how has this story helped or hurt me? And what can I do so my life looks like what I want it to? How can I change the story? So every time, how's the story helped or hurt you? And what would your life look like if you changed the story? And I want you to ponder that this week as you go through the week. Any thought or comment that causes us to become anxious or paralyzed by our emotions or stuck in our circumstances should not be affirmed. We need to stop doing that. And I understand we have painful memories. I get it. But our emotional attachment to our memories is brutally bad. We just can't let them go. How many friends or family members do you have who continue with that same story? And you say to yourself, they just can't let it go. But aren't you doing the same? Aren't we all doing the same? When someone says, tell me about your life, tell me how many times that story actually really changes. Most of the time, you could bring the recording out and go, well, let me tell you what I've told the last 2 million people who have asked me that. This is my story. But they don't support us. They either make people feel sorry for us, or they make us feel sorry for us. And neither of those things are going to help us get up in the morning. If we don't take the time necessary to process painful memories, our brain experiences them over and over and over again until we finally let it go. But we all know our memories are going to be easily triggered if we haven't let them go. And when they come flooding forward, believe it or not, it takes 36 hours for the stress hormones that came with it to let them go. So every time you have an emotional moment and breakdown, plan on 36 hours. You might as well just hang it up because you're just going to feel bad. And we're self-inflicting. It's all up to us. In her book, Healing Letters, Myrtle Fillmore said this: to be truly healed and quickened by the life more abundant, one must forget the past and the limitations of the past and offer every thought, every ounce of energy to spirit, to be used in bringing God's kingdom of light and love and order and beauty and health into the earth and into the lives of all people. Now, many of you know Myrtle's story. She was a super wise woman. She did a lot of spiritual editing and spent 2 years editing her life in order to get out of a wheelchair and finally walk again. All her life, tuberculosis, all her life an invalid, all her life. She goes to one new thought kind of seminar and she changes how she sees it all. She not only changed her life, but she co-created Unity, and it helped change our lives and all the other people that kind of belief is impacting. She went on to teach and write about how each of us is a co-creator and that we are not marionettes on strings and someone else is pulling the strings. We are co-creators. So how are you co-creating your life? Now, I want to share a funny story I've shared in years past, but I think this story fits spiritual editing pretty darn well. If you've ever watched Everybody Loves Raymond, there is one of the best editing stories in one of their episodes. Raymond's brother Robert is getting married. They ask the question, if anybody sees any reason why these two should not get married. And up jumps the mother. Robert's mother, Marie, stands up and goes on and on and on to the point where the minister sits on the step and lets her go on. The couple comes into the reception like this. You know, worst wedding ever, worst day ever, right? Now, Raymond, who witnessed all of this, has to get up and give the best man toast. And he's trying to figure out, how am I going to do this with all of what's happening? And it didn't help. He had just seen a fight between his own father and the bride's father. So with all this in his memory, he gets up and he begins by telling everyone, my mother has behaved this way our entire life. Okay, that's where he started. He said, speaking our mind, no matter how inappropriate it seems, interfering in our personal lives, embarrassing us in so many ways. And then he said this. He said that he and his brother had learned to edit their memories of their mom throughout their entire life, choosing to remember the good in every situation. He said they could either remember how their mom loved them enough to speak up and protect them in her own way, or they could remember all the painful aspects of her embarrassing them and being their mother. Editing their experiences with their mom, he said, allowed them to have memories of her that brought joy and humor to their lives. Now, I know it sounds like a silly story, but it's the perfect example of what we can do in a moment, how we can change what that looks like. Excuse me. And how we can remember it's a choice. How many things and events have you been to where it didn't go so well? And you went there thinking, oh, it's going to be a glorious day. But it wasn't. And it was until someone spoke to you that you don't like. And then from then on, it was downhill. But we can change that. And that's what this story does. It goes back to how I started today. What do you want to experience this year? How will you ensure that your thoughts support those experiences? And what character will you play in the story? Let's review our lessons. The power of spiritual editing can help us when we first monitor the quality of our thoughts, positive, unlimited thoughts versus self-sabotaging. Number 2, acknowledge the image of our role. Are we the victim, the victor, or the villain? Number 3, identify and release attachments. Don't allow experiences to become anchors. And number 4, find the good in situations and reflections. There's no value in causing ourselves pain. And the affirmation I have for us today is I empower my life through spiritual editing. Let's say that together. I empower my life through spiritual editing. And the quote is by Iyanla Vanzant, and it says, when you stand and share your story in an empowering way, your story will heal you and your story will heal somebody else. Let's take that in for a moment. So we pause now to reflect upon the power we have within to choose the thoughts we hold, to hold the consciousness that helps support us, to see our lives in the way we want it to turn out, not the way it currently is. To change our mind when we start to see ourselves spiraling down that rabbit hole. To recognize that we are powerful human beings created with the greatest divine light of all, and no one but us. And that connection to the divine can empower us more. And so it is. Amen.